Okay, so this is going to be a series of short videos on how to assemble an underwater Google Cardboard rig. So, first thing we're going to need a copper. We're going to need a piece of copper tape or aluminum tape or the adhesive aluminum tape to touch the edge of the phone. Then we're going to need this 3D printed piece. It's just, it's like just a mask that you put in front, and the reason why you do that is that otherwise the water will touch the screen and register a touch all the time. So what we're doing is just put it in place. I've set it up so that it can be taped in place. Generally you want to run Google Cardboard as a way to center it, and then you attach it as you should. So we're going to attach it on the other side too, and you want to bend this, and you want to make sure that you can get like a touch. You can hear the vibration. You want to make sure that the vibration registers across this. There's another thing we print is just a little rod. You can actually use a popsicle stick if you like for this. The important thing is making sure that this guy sticks here. Now this is what this is doing is basically just a capacitance trick. So it wants to be a little long on the other side because this is affected an extra capacitor. So let me assemble this properly real quick. It's all in place. So what we're going to do next is that we're going to, this is a standard underwater pouch. You can just buy it on Amazon for $5, $10. If you want to be fancy about it, you can get one that has an isolated audio output, but I personally find that to be a bit overkill. So with some difficulty, let me slide this thing in there. And this is going to be in there for the rest of the build. If we need to charge it, we're going to have to open this up and charge it from there, but I want to leave this in. Now you can still remove it. We haven't done anything permanent to the phone, and we won't. Of course, it's a bit of a more pain in the neck to do than a regular Google Cardboard build when you can just extract the phone, because this has to be waterproof. Anyway, this goes in here. So let me do that real quick. So this is a little rod with a bump on one end. You can easily make it out of a popsicle stick and a bit of plastic, or you can 3D print it. This wants to go here, obviously. And in order to activate the Google Cardboard thing, instead of making a mess and using, Bluetooth or even just the audio jack, we're just going to use this because it's already there. The movement is simple, and most importantly, this guarantees that this thing is compatible with Google Cardboard 100%, so there's no software issues. So obviously you want to make sure that it touches when you move it. And so what you're going to have to do next is simply this is plastic, so just apply some super glue. You can use liquid or gel, that's entirely up to you. Make sure you don't mess with the seal, obviously. And I will suggest taking a bit of extra time to make sure that it's aligned properly. Test it a couple of times, and just hold on to it until it settles. Know that this is basically it. You have a waterproof Google Cardboard setup already. What the 3D printed component does here is that it prevents the transparent plastic from being pushed in too much by the water, and this leaves you with functional touch options. So we're gonna let these things settle for 5 minutes and then come back to the build. Since we already sealed up all the electrical stuff, you can use any kind of Google Cardboard setup that you like. In this case, I like this one because it's made of plastic and it doesn't have any fabric stuff on it. Plus, it kind of looks a bit like a diving mask, which I appreciated when I started building it. The most important thing is we're going to do this. We're going to extend the size of this a little bit so that it can work with the water. You know, different coefficients of refraction and all. And we're going to replace the lenses with these. These here are regular swimming goggles with a +8 prescription. You can buy these on Amazon, or you can buy something if you can buy something with a higher prescription, +12 for example, you don't need to do anything. You can just remove the lenses from this and just use these. So this keeps your eyes in the dry, and it keeps the electronics in the dry. Everything else is wet. The logic being is that the least amount of stuff you have to waterproof, the more likely it is that it will remain waterproof. So for this guy, we're going to have to lengthen it. I've already shown this in my previous video, but I want to show you how I do it. The reason why I like this particular kind is that you can literally use the box that it comes in as your extender. Once again, it looks a lot like a swimming mask, which I like. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to get rid of this part. We're going to get rid of this. We are going to take this and we are going to put it in front of everything else with the phone over here. This gives us a bit more focal length so that we can remove these lenses and replace them with these guys. So the first thing we're going to have to do is that we're going to get rid of the lenses. Sadly, one of the things that we cannot use is the button here, which is too bad because it is a good button. But for now, we're going to have to get rid of the lenses, which depends on how you do it. Is going to depend on your model. On this one in particular, there are screws here. You just unscrew them and just get rid of them completely, which I am now going to do. Unscrewed everything. We can remove this, and we're literally just removing the lenses and any kind of lens assembly that might come with them. And the reason for it is just that we're not gonna need them for anything for this. I'm pretty sure you can find a use for these. Now these are, in addition to having screws, these are held in place by these little plastic parts. I need 2 hands to do this, so I'm gonna have to come back in a second. There we go. Now all that is left, of course, you know, it should be fairly easy to figure out what to do with these lenses. They are plastic lenses, so I would not use them for any kind of, you know, laser or anything like that. But pretty sure that it can be recycled for other things. So all we have to do now is put this thing back together, because it has to go back together, obviously. Now, depending on what cardboard headset you chose, this will be harder or easier. In this case, with the Spectre, it's a bit of a pain in the neck, because this is all rubber. However, we bought it specifically so that we could reuse the rubber. Again, this is not even trying to be waterproof, but it doesn't need to be. So all we have to do is put the whole thing back together and screw it back in place. Then we are going to lengthen it. Put this guy back together. The next step is to, again, don't forget, you're going to need this. Oh, by the way, I haven't put in the head strap that goes here yet. It's over here. Yeah, I think I'll do that off camera, because again, this is a pretty standard Google Cardboard setup. So this is going to go in here. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to lengthen this distance to some degree. In this case, you can do whatever you want. You can, you know, you can. Here, this is a 3D printed spacer that I made. You can just use that. In my case, I'm going to use the spacer, and I'm also going to use the box that this thing came in, because it so happens that it's a perfect size. You can use this lid to put the electronics in. We're going to have to cut aside so that this can move. And all we have to do is cut a hole in this side with a Dremel, and then glue it in place, or tape it in place, or fasten it in place somehow. So next step, cut this up. We're going to have to cut a square hole here for the viewport, and then we're going to have to make a matching indentation for this part so that it can be moved, and a matching indentation for this part so that it can fit this without putting mechanical stress on it. Depending on what headset you buy, you may have to get something different, or you can just use a regular box, or again, you can just print something. The bottom line is you need a spacer. For this to work in water, the phone, instead of being over here, is going to have to be roughly over here. Now, how you cut this, you can do whatever you like. You can use a Dremel. In this case, again, leave yourself a little bit of a margin because it will make this thing structurally stronger. Any box of the right size will do. Basically, you need roughly an inch more, that's 2.5 centimeters, distance for this thing to work properly in water. Just kind of go all the way around and cut it. Very simple. Now that we've done a hole here, the next step is to make sure that the phone fits in this horizontally. So we're going to have to decide if we want this thing to open one way or the other. Let's open it this way, because that's what people are used to. So, given where the electronics are, we're going to have to trim this side a little bit. We can also use a Dremel. Then we're going to have to glue this guy together. Happily enough, that's the last thing we have to do, really. So, now this depends on your phone, obviously. Well, it depends on the size of this waterproof enclosure, really. So you want to make sure that this is nice and centered. So this, the rigid part kind of gets in the way, so we're going to have to cut notches here and here. Again, use a Dremel, fit that into your 3D print, do what you do. I actually cut this a little bit too much, if anything, but that's not a showstopper. All that it has to do is make sure that this, when you move this part, it can still react as it should. You can kind of hear the vibration there. And, of course, I'm trying to show it's not vibrating. Hang on. There we go. And this is all you have to do. This is basically the end of the build. All you gotta do now is you've got to cut this part, because it's gonna get in the way otherwise. And in this case, for this particular headset, which I do recommend, we're going to Dremel this off and use this part as an anchor for the spacer. Then, what we're going to do is that we're going to make sure that this here can actually hold itself in place. And what I ended up doing was just epoxy some Velcro on it instead of the snap fit. You'll see in a minute. For now, the next step is to glue this part to this part. And again, cut this off. So let's do just that. Alright, this is more or less the final result. Now you can probably shorten this. It's something I tend to do at the end because, let's not cut until we have to. The corners of the waterproof enclosure are holding the phone in place. However, you can also add the 3D printed spacer. And just to check, let's see if this is still vibrating properly. Yes, it is. Okay, just making sure. What I did here was that I glued this here and I kind of welded this. You can see those 3 holes with a soldering iron. Again, this is a spacer that you can use. It's optional. I personally appreciate using it and make swimming a little easier. Still in place, yes, good. And that's really it. It just goes down like this. All we do now is we have to epoxy or JB weld some Velcro here and here to make sure that this thing can close, and then it's good to test. Remember, what you will have to do is that you're going to have to put the swimming goggles on, then you're going to have to put this on, and then you're in good shape. Before we proceed, I want to show the finished piece. Again, this thing exists in 3 pieces. It's going to be the phone, the stuff that goes inside of the under the waterproof part, and this thing. Well, 4 pieces, I guess, because you're also going to need the goggles, obviously. Very simple. So I ended up gluing the spacer in place. I added some tape here because I wanted it to stop the light. Here's your Velcro. There's 2 layers of Velcro. That makes sure that they will hold in place underwater. And I am a little vain, so I added my logo on it. Not that the box ended up being flipped, but that's okay. So this is what the part should end up looking like. Very nice, very simple. So what you see here is the end of the build. You're just supposed to put these on, and then you put this guy on. You can see the Google Cardboard setup being turned on in the meantime. And like regular Google Cardboard, you use this to trigger it. Now you can probably paint this black. I'm sure I'm getting way too much. One thing I suggest you do is that you cut this, because you may just want to hold this part, which will work. And there you have it. This is a completed underwater Google Cardboard setup, which you can then use for. I find it fairly relaxing. I just load Google Maps and just kind of let myself float and pretend I'm a mile up. Or if you want, you can load various space VR environments and just kind of let yourself. Well, it's not really zero gravity because you'd have to go on the Vomit Comet for that, but the proprioception as you're floating in a pool and you're looking around and you see the stars is actually pretty neat. I'm sure it would get better if you were wearing the dry suit. Now, one thing that I had to do here is that this part was kind of touching, so I had to, cut this off a little bit. Anyway, that is the end of the build. To remove all this stuff, obviously you just open it. See what I did here with the two layers of Velcro. You just remove this part, and you just take the phone out if you need to. Now, one thing that's important is that water will touch this, so normally your phone might overheat if it's in this little pouch. However, once you're in operation, that will not happen because that's it's getting at least indirect water cooling. So that is basically the end of the build. Again, I suggest using the Spectre for the donor Google Cardboard component. This is a regular pouch. I think they're from Johto. Just stuff you buy on Amazon. So the cost of this thing is, for the Spectre, it was $12. For the pouch here, it was $10. You're gonna have to 3D print these three parts. Well, I guess you can just use like a popsicle stick for this one. The phone is a ZTE blade, so you're looking at about $80. So, and the goggles here were $11. So as you can see, the cost of this thing is basically roughly $25 more than your regular Google Cardboard. So that's the end of that. This is how you make an underwater VR rig for cheap. It will work. It will be reliable. And the next video will be me showing it off in the pool that we have, or you can just watch the previous video because this is the same build. This is a Spear Plumber for Robots Everywhere. This design is hereby released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 3.0. And I would like to say hi to Ryan Holmes of Space VR for challenging me to build this thing before he built his own. As you can see, here you have it. Thank you.